Lorna Wargo with the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, and if you were intending to be at the Coastal Recreational Bottomfish meeting, planning for 2025 and 2026, you're in the right place. I think we can start with introductions, and I will just share that I'm working solo right now this morning. Heather Hall had a meeting she had to hold with the director, and so unanticipated scheduling kind of conflict there, but she'll join us when she can. So I'll be kicking it off, and okay. Yeah, thank you for muting yourself, and we'll do introductions here as I see people are logging in. Well, I think we'll go ahead with introductions. Folks still might pop up. We're just a couple minutes in. And I just want to let everyone know that we are recording this meeting, and it will get posted to the website later. So I'm going to just start going down the list as I see it. If you could just unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and your organization, or if you're just an individual, that's helpful to know. And I'm going to start with the phone number ending in 7172.
Johnson. Good morning, Lorna. It's Dave Johnson, North Coast, Puget Sound Anglers.
Dave Johnson, okay. All right, thank you, Dave. Next one, number 3569. Just asking folks to introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Madison. I'm a grad student at Oregon State University, and my master's thesis focuses on black rockfish life history traits. So I just wanted to join the meeting and connect with people and see what's going on up in Washington.
Okay, welcome, Madison.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see, and for those of you that just popped on, I'm Lorna Wargo with Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, and we're just going through introductions. So let's see, Adrian Purser.
Good morning. My name is Adrian Purser. I'm with the Port Galliscolum tribe. I just got hired on about 2 weeks ago, so I'm just taking in all the information I can get having to do with finfish and bottomfish.
All right, thank you. Welcome, Adrian. Just have a first name, Alan.
Yeah, this is Alan Sarich. I'm a bit of a stranger to these parts. I'm with the Quinaults, actually. seeing how the other side goes on the bottomfish.
All right. Good morning, Alan. Nice to hear from you. Let's see. I have Chris German.
Morning, Lorna. Yeah, Chris German with the Coast Guard.
Good morning. Dave Johnson, you're on twice. Okay. Guess I can go to Jason Westrick.
Good morning, Lorna, Jason, Westrick,
Mhm.
Westport Charters.
Hi, Jason. Larry Phillips.
Yeah, good morning, all. Larry Phillips, American Sport Fishing Association.
See, Randy Lato.
Randy Lato, always fishing, Area 3 La Push.
Okay, and then Brett Weber.
Brett Weber, Mutineer Charters, Westport, Washington.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Brett. And then Steve Westrick.
Morning, Lorna, everybody. Yeah, Steve Westrick from Westport Charter Boat Association, Westport here.
All right. Good morning, Steve. And then I think somehow I skipped over you, Paul Moranti.
Yeah, Paul Morani. I am a member of the Groundfish Advisory Panel, and I'm also on that panel representing the coastal charter boats for the state of Washington.
Okay. Thanks, Paul. And then we have a Jason with no last name. Do you want to introduce yourself? So you can come back. So Jason, is that you twice or? Okay.
Well, not that I'm aware of, but I only logged in the one time.
Okay, great. Wasn't sure. Sometimes I actually see phone numbers and names, so it's not always clear how someone's logged in. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and get into the meeting here. So again, my name is Lorna Wargo, and I am
Hey,
in the
Lorna.
intergovernment. Pardon?
Oh, you missed me.
Oh, I did. I am sorry. That's bad. Phil Anderson, you can introduce. Thank you.
Oh, thanks. No big deal. Phil Anderson, I'm a council member, primarily representing the interests of Washington sport and commercial fisheries.
Yes, thank you, Phil. And please, yeah, jump in. I'm working solo, so it's I feel like I'm at the dashboard of an airplane and I don't know all the controls. So hopefully won't crash. But yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. And I do work with Heather in the Intergovernmental Ocean Policy group. I'm on the groundfish management team. Been with the agency for many years, but this is actually my first time through the groundfish regulation process that operates on the 2-year cycle. So in many cases, all of you have some collective experience that exceeds mine in this matter. So to start, we're just going to go over today sort of the high level overview of the process. We do have 2 meetings through the Pacific Fishery Management Council that these WDFW hosted meetings kind of dovetail with. So the dates there are for the April council meeting, the 6th through 11th, and that's in Seattle this year. And that's where the harvest specifications and then final preferred alternatives for those are adopted by the council. And then preliminary management measures are adopted. And then in June, this year, June 6th through the 13th in San Diego, the management measures are selected with the final preferred alternative. And we'll kind of come back to the timeline for the council process in a slide further on. We'll also kind of look at past and current management and catch. The bulk of the meeting will be discussing sort of what catches we've seen, what's happening in the fisheries, and what we're seeing for the next set of harvest catch limits for 2025 and 26. So all of this is looking beyond 2024 into the next 2 years. And then we'll talk about next steps at the very end. Just bear with me. Okay. So just a high-level overview, the Pacific Fishery Management Council has management responsibility for fisheries in the zone from 3 to 200 miles. The management is accomplished for groundfish through a fishery management plan for the West Coast. There's over 90 species that are covered in that fishery management plan, and it describes the council's harvest policies for how these fisheries are managed, and it addresses or covers multiple sectors, commercial, recreational, and tribal. And within those 3 categories, there's a myriad of different fishery target strategies, gear types. So those are the broad categories. In the council process, there are advisory bodies that provide input to the council. So there's the groundfish management team, which I just mentioned I'm a member of. And we also have Whitney Roberts from our intergovernmental ocean policy team. And her focus is largely on commercial fisheries and mine is on recreational. As Paul Moranti mentioned when he introduced himself, he is a Washington representative on the Groundfish Advisory Subpanel, also known as the GAP, and that's made up of industry, so recreational and commercial sectors. And we also have in the council realm the Scientific and Statistical Committee, and for us, Dr. Teresa So sits on that, and they're the group that vets all the stock assessments and endorses what the overfishing limits and best available science that's used in the council process. And then lastly, there's enforcement consultants, and Captain Dan Chadwick sits on that for Washington, and they advise from the regular or the enforcement side on actions the council is considering. So just bear with me, I have to do this in duplicate. So for the groundfish, it's managed on a biennial process or time frame. So we have stock assessments that are completed for a host of species in odd numbered years. And then from those stock assessments, we derive the harvest limits. And those then also are considered along with management measures to keep fisheries under those harvest limits. And this process takes place through a 3-meeting process with November, April, and June. So it's starting in the odd number year, ending in the even year, and informing the following 2 years regulatory package. In between the November, April, and June council meetings, we'll hold stakeholder meetings for Washington to be able to further develop the management measures that we want to implement, share feedback from the council meetings as they progress. And again, the objective here is to set up conservation measures or how we want to structure the fishery to stay under the catch limits that have been set. On the state side, we have management authority from 0 to 3 miles, and where we implement regulations in state rule, we often defer to federal rule so that they're coordinated and consistent. And we also have the ability to be more conservative or restrictive than federal regulations. So that's a policy decision that the agency has, or authority there. Part of our role is to coordinate stakeholder input, so conduit between the council process and stakeholders within the state. Some of the recreational management measures that we can consider, and this is where we can have some latitude within state regulatory authority, and that's daily limits, area closures, depth restrictions, or even non-retention of a species for a season or certain months. And then we're also tracking harvest in season. And I will pause here if there's any questions. Okay. And I have set this up so that I can see hands. So just, I know oftentimes the way we have to work in teams, the presenter can't see hands, but I actually can at this moment. So a little bit more detail here with the, just letting Larry back in. A little bit more detail here on the groundfish management timeline. So here it shows starting in June. So for us, this would have been June of 2023, where the council adopts the final stock assessments and begins the process that we're currently in now to consider the harvest specifications and management measures. That scoping continues in September. And then in November, the council adopts preliminary harvest specifications or catch limits. And then through November and January, the groundfish management team is analyzing catch data, drafting analytical documents, all with the purpose of structuring fisheries that will stay under those catch limits. Kind of in that red circle, that's where we're at now. And like I mentioned, that's where we'll host state meetings in conjunction with those council meetings to keep people abreast of what's going on in the progress. Then in April, the council will adopt the final preferred harvest specifications and the preliminary management measures for public review. And WDFW will hold a meeting in May following that to get stakeholder input, and then report back to the council in June where they'll take final action. And then these regulations are implemented by NIMS, and those will go into effect for the next year. So in this case, that would be 2025. So for this upcoming cycle, the stocks, and for some years in the past that have been most consequential for management in Washington have been the black rockfish. Canary rockfish, unfortunately, is popping back up. And then yellow eye is one that's also continued for a couple of decades to be one of particular focus. And then more recently, we've had to take management actions relative to vermilion, copper, and quillback rockfish. Just kind of by way of review, here are the 2023-2024 management measures that are in place. So currently for daily limits in all marine areas, there is no canary sublimit. Cabezon is a 1 fish sublimit. And we'll continue with copper, quillback, vermilion rockfish with no retention in May, June, and July for 2024. The lingcod season is the same as the bottomfish season, so opening the second Saturday of March through the third Saturday of October. And this is where, when we start getting, I'll just forewarn you, getting into the depth closures, I'm still being relatively new to the recreational management side of things. I get tripped up. And I know most of you on the call will be very familiar with these. But on the North Coast, we still have the 20 fathom depth restriction where it's closed June 1 through July 31st. Deeper than that, except for lingcod, sablefish, Pacific cod, bocaccio, silver gray, canary, widow, and yellowtail are now allowed on halibut days, and that was the case last year as well. And then in addition, yellowtail and whittle remain, I guess, part of the bag limit in July, seaward of 20 fathoms. On the South Coast, we have the 30 fathom depth restriction that's closed to lingcod. Well, it's been May 1 through 31. Let's see. Is that Matt? Could you mute yourself? I believe that Matt Less now. I'm not sure how to, I can't see the whole name. All right, thank you and welcome. So the deepwater lingcod, which is closed halibut days. Did you have a question? Okay. Deepwater lingcod is closed except halibut days and June 1st through the 15th and September 1st through the 30th. And then there are no longer any YRCAs, which are the yellow rockfish conservation areas. There was one, or I should say two, the Westport and the South Coast, and those have been opened. And then for the Columbia River, lingcod is allowed with halibut on board north of the Washington-Oregon border on halibut days. There's a deepwater lingcod closure, like the South Coast. It's open June 1st through the 15th and September 1st through the 30th. And then there's a list there that I won't read of bottomfish that can be retained on halibut days, and that's been expanded from in the past. For the Columbia River, that list is of species that can be retained is done in coordination with Oregon to ensure that bag limits aren't exceeded. And then for canary, I just wanted to kind of remind folks that while we currently don't have a sub-bag limit, for full retention of canary was only restored fully in Washington in 2019. And it was a 2 fish bag limit in 2018, working backwards, and 1 fish bag limit in 2017. So we've took a stepwise once canary was considered or declared rebuilt in 2016. Washington rules have taken a stepwise approach to liberalizing the bag limit. Okay. So here, quite a bit of detail, and I'll just kind of walk through this. So this is recent harvest guidelines or catch limits with catch for 2021, 22, and 23. And I'll just flag that here catch is actually total mortality. So this is retained and released, not just what went into the bag for the fishermen. So working left to right, this table is presenting the harvest guidelines from 21 through 24. So you can see each of those years there. Then in the middle portion of the table, it has the preliminary harvest guidelines for 25 and 26. And then, as I mentioned, total mortality. So that includes retained and released catch for 21, 22, and 23. And then the last column just shows the difference between the 2023 mortality relative to the harvest limit. And so here, I'm going to speak first to vermilion, and then we can I'll circle back to canary, because obviously you can see vermilion is highlighted there as well as canary. So the new rule in 2023 prohibited the retention of copper, quillback, and vermilion beginning May 1 through July 31st. And as you can see, last year we exceeded the vermilion harvest guidelines. So that was 0.7 metric tons in 2023, and we caught 0.85 metric tons. So it exceeded that value. I think a couple of things are responsible. One, it was a new rule, and anglers, it was evident in May, had not, I guess, picked up on the new rule. We had port sampling staff that were actually, fortunately, noticing the retention of vermilion, and were able to flag that for me, and we got some signage up. And by June, we saw the retention of vermilion drop. So about 28% of the season total was caught in May. So again, indicating a lack of compliance, and then just anglers not being aware of that new rule. As we got the new signage posted, and this was primarily a Nia Bay issue. Most of the vermilion are caught on the north coast. The landings of vermilion dropped, and so we saw about half of it compared to May to June. So that was effective there. Most of the halibut are caught in area 4, about 71%, and then about nearly 60% were caught in halibut and salmon fisheries. So I also think some of our extended halibut opportunity led to us, again, this is landed and released fish, so we are accounting for mortality even though those fish are not retained. So I think that's also part of it. Going into 2024, what we're planning to do is a bit of more concerted outreach at the beginning of the season, and then just tracking that closely as we go. And we still have the opportunity to prohibit retention in August, although retention I'd say encounters with vermilion drop in August. That's still an option for 2024. So looking beyond, generally what we're seeing regardless of species are lower HGs in the next cycle. So I'll just kind of walk through those. For example, black rockfish, the 2024 harvest guideline is 270 metric tons, and in 2025 that drops to 244 metric tons, and then 241 in 2026. I'm going to skip canary for the moment. Yellow eye rockfish, the harvest guideline in 2024 is 10.4 metric tons, and that drops to 8.6 in 2025, and 8.8, or increases a little bit, and 8.8 in 2026. Vermilion rockfish actually bump up a little bit for 2025 compared to 2024. So from 0.7 metric tons to 0.8, and then drops back down again in 2026 to 0.7. So vermilion rockfish will continue to be one that I think we'll have to manage very carefully too. Most of the nearshore species, and I won't read those off individually, but collectively, the nearshore harvest guideline, the complex total in 2024 was 17.9 metric tons, and that's dropping to 17.4 in 2025 and 17 in 2026. So far, those have not been constraining stocks, and don't expect that. Okay. And I'm pausing here. So good morning, Butch. Let's see.
Morning.
So I'm just walking us through the recent harvest guidelines and catch. For the kelp greenling and cabezon complex, again, a little bump up in 2025. So we currently have a harvest guideline of 17.1 metric tons. That goes up next year to 19.8 and then drops again the subsequent year. And some of these fluctuations are due to how many years out the stock is from being assessed, and there can be a staleness factor that's applied because we get less certain of the status of the stock the more years we go beyond the stock assessment. So you can see here for canary, which I know folks are concerned about, and we'll talk more at length here as we get further into the presentation. But you can see from 2021 through 2024, harvest guidelines have been in the range of 47 metric tons to this year at 40.8 metric tons. And that is dropping under the preliminary harvest guidelines of 17.1 metric tons in 2025 and 17.2 in 2026. And comparing that to our recent total mortality, you can see that we've been at 39 metric tons in 2021, 37 in 2022, and then it dropped this past year in 2023 to 25, but all substantially higher than a preliminary harvest guideline of 17 metric tons. So I think probably the only other one I would flag here, we have lingcod. You'll note in looking at total mortality, it has increased in 2021 from 173 to 220 metric tons. And then yellowtail, we also see an increase from 2021 to 2022 to 23 from 61 metric tons to 101 metric tons. So just kind of highlighting some, oh, let's see. I believe Ron, I just let you in and maybe you need to mute. Yes, thank you. Okay. So substantial changes there with yellowtail in particular, and also seeing stronger lingcod landings. And I'm going to go to the next slide and then I'll pause and give some folks a chance to ask questions. And I will circle back to some of the newer callers. So this table just provides some additional background information. So that previous slide and this one just to provide context for the management measures that we need to think about. Here, this just breaks down the mortality down by fishery for 2023. So just as a percent. And so across the top, we have the bottomfish, halibut, salmon, salmon/halibut, dive spearfish, and tuna. And you can see for the most part, tuna is not a big player, and neither is the dive spearfish. Salmon halibut is when both are open, and because those are both quota managed, we have a separate category that combines anglers that are targeting both of those. So it's, in my thinking, I often lump the halibut with the salmon halibut number to get a sense of what the halibut fishery would look like, because they're targeting both, or at least landing both. Excuse me. So as you probably can see, which isn't surprising, black rockfish are landed primarily in bottomfish and some in salmon. Canary rockfish is split almost evenly between bottomfish and halibut, so 48% for bottomfish. And if you combine the halibut, like I was just saying, with the salmon halibut trips, that totals about 37%, or I'm sorry, 44% added together. Yellow eye rockfish, about 1/3 are landed in the bottomfish fishery. And then again, if you combine the halibut with the salmon halibut trip types, so it's 45% and 15% added together. It's about 60% of where the yellow eye are encountered. So again, this is total mortality. So it's not reflecting catch, but also released. The nearshore species, about half are taken in bottomfish and about 1/4 taken each by halibut and salmon. It's a little variation there, but that's roughly speaking. Cabezon and kelp greenling, primarily bottomfish, with 2/3 taken in all the other fisheries combined. Ling cod, bottomfish and halibut combined equates to 85%, so significant portion there, which wouldn't be surprising. Pacific cod, halibut, and salmon combined is about 94, or almost all of the Pacific cod that are caught. Yellowtail, again, salmon and bottomfish combined equate to nearly all of the yellowtail that are encountered. Tiger rockfish are spread across many trip types. And then finally, Boccaccio, primarily in halibut at 69%. So I'm going to pause here and just have a couple of folks that have come on, and I'll have you help me if I miss you. So I'll start with you, Butch. Do you just want to introduce yourself to the group?
Yeah, Butch Smith, Port of El Waco Commissioner, own Charters and Motel, President of the El Waco Charter Association for 30 years now this year, and PFMC, sit on the PFMC Council and the Canadian Treaty Council, and I just got newly elected to the National Charter Boat Association, NACO, as president. So anyway, thank you, and keep up the great work, Lorna.
All right, thanks, Butch. Let's see, looking down the list. Joey, I just have a first name. Are you able to unmute yourself? Come back.
Sorry, I'm just observing, so.
Okay, that's no problem. Let's see. And then Caitlin.
Hi, I just work customer service for Fish Program and I'm observing.
All right. Well, thank you, Caitlin, and Joey and Butch for joining us. This meeting is being recorded, so if there's any part in the beginning that you missed, you want to circle back to, it will get posted to the website. And I think I've caught everybody that came on. And just for those of you that weren't here at the beginning, I'm doing this meeting solo. Heather Hall will join us if she's able, but she had a schedule conflict. So I'll pause here as well, just if there's any questions, if you need for me to circle back to any of the information on these slides. Oh, Larry, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Lorna. Couple questions. So the canary catch and harvest in 2022-23, is that, so I'm thinking about Marine Area 1, is that just Washington?
Yes.
Does that not include Oregon? So, you know, we're not asked when we land whether we fished the Washington or Oregon portion, at least I'm not being asked. And that's a very popular fishery. You guys know the numbers probably more than any of us, but the canary landings Marine Area 1 have been significantly higher since that south shelf of the canyon. So just you know, maybe there's some room there. I mean, you were transferring it to Oregon, so correction. Then second question is, do we get a credit for descending device use? I know in California recently published a study they did that suggested really high survival rates of copper rockfish when used descending devices. I think it was in the upwards of 80%.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Larry. I will have to.
Maybe last question. Your vermilion, your vermilion rockfish, are those? You said those are include release mortalities. Is that self-reporting by anglers of encountering a vermilion?
Okay.
And I know we had some challenges with species identification. Is there a correction factor there for that, or?
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Larry. So yeah, I'll in terms of the canary being landed in Area 1, I do believe it's attributed to the port where they're landed. I'll tell you that, and this will be more evident as we move into the presentation. The vast majority of canary are landed out of Area 2, but I'll note, that the increase in Area 1, so that's helpful to know. And as far as the descending device credit, we will be able to apply that for canary rockfish. We don't necessarily, with the way Washington catch estimates are structured and reported, and the information collected dockside, apply that across the board. But I do think we have the capacity. It's been an evolving process to redesign our catch estimation procedures to support that. So I do think that can be in place. And then as far as the release mortality being self-reported, yes. So it's what our ocean sampling program, port samplers, when they query the angler at the dock, it's, checking what's retained and then asking the angler what's been released. And yes, we're aware of the challenge with IDing vermilion rockfish. It's a colorful one and it can be easily confused. So, Bill? Oh,
yeah, good morning. Thanks, Lorna, and appreciate all the work you and your group have put into this presentation, and appreciate you involving all of us as you move forward. I believe I understand this correctly, but I just wanted to ask the question to be certain. So I'm focusing on canary rockfish, not to be that surprising. And we had a new stock assessment, and the new stock assessment suggested that the abundance of canary rockfish had decreased in a significant way from the previous assessment. And as a result, the annual catch limit, this is we manage canary on a coastwide basis, so Washington, Oregon, California. And as a result, the annual catch limit was reduced by a significant amount, I believe over 50%, something on the order of 1,300 metric tons down to 5 something, but don't hold me to those numbers. And so what the groundfish management team did in their work in November, which is where this 17.1 and 17.2 values came from, is that they essentially took proportional reductions in all of the sectors and proportional to the reduction in the ACL to come up with this number. So the 17.1 and 17, and they did that in most, but not all cases, but most cases. And maybe an example of where they didn't do that is in the at-sea bycatch for canary rockfish in the whiting fishery. There is not a proportional reduction there, as I recall. So just, sorry for the phone ringing in the background. So we have that piece. That's where the origination, that's how we got from where we were, 40.8 down to the 17.1 and 17.2. Because there is no long-term allocation amongst sectors, there's no standing long-term allocation for canary rockfish among sectors. And so, and that's because back when we did the original allocations of groundfish, canary was in the rebuilding status, and it didn't make sense to us to make allocation decisions based on values that were derived as a result of being in a rebuilding mode. And so the council's been making allocation decisions about the ACL of canary rockfish on a biennial basis. In other words, every spec cycle, they're looking at these numbers and they're establishing an allocation between sectors of canary rockfish on a biennial basis. So while the 17.1 and 17.2, there is a significant issue with canary, there's no doubt about that. And those are the preliminary harvest guidelines as noted in the table that were adopted by the council in November. There is a lot of discussion yet to go, these are my words, between now, when we get to the April council meeting, and then when we get to the final decision in June. It's not those numbers, just re-emphasizing that those are preliminary and could change some based on allocation decisions that have yet to be made. And so I just wanted to put that out there and kind of see, get your reaction to that, to see whether you and I are on the same page in terms of where we are on that.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. That's really helpful background and context for the conversation going from this point forward, which is largely going to center on canary. And just want to flag for folks that Heather was able to join us. So Heather, welcome. And
thanks. Hi, everyone.
Just, yeah. So responding to that, Phil, yes, part of what the GMT is doing in our overwinter work is looking at and describing the importance of canary to the various fishery sectors. And at least for my piece of it, I've been digging deep into the canary rockfish data, the regulation history, because compared to other states, our approach was more measured. So when canary were declared rebuilt in 2016 following a 2015 stock assessment that signaled the stock was healthy and could be made available for harvest. At the time, WDFW didn't just reduce or eliminate all retention prohibition. So it went to a 1 fish bag limit in 2017, 2 fish bag limit for canary in 2018. And then 2019 was the first year that there was no kind of sub bag limit for canary. And in looking at the catch data, you can see actually the response of the fishery to those changes, but there's a lag. So my interpretation is that anglers were still hesitant or hadn't quite adapted to the ability or the allowance of keeping canary. Then with the changes, I think primarily, and this is where Heather can jump in, that led into the 2021-22 cycle, if I've got that right, and opening up some of the YRCAs the last couple of years. That's where we see the utilization of the canary harvest guideline nearly attained. So 21 at 39 metric tons, and then 2022 at 37, I think was largely due to the expansion or relaxation of some of the depth restrictions that had been in place for many years prior to that. So in crafting the analysis that will help inform the council's discussion, hopefully on allocation, one of the things I'm focusing on is just trying to fully describe that measured process that WDFW took to opening up canary opportunity, so that it isn't viewed as, well, you had a 50 metric ton harvest guideline in 2017 and you only took a few tons. So, you know, if you look over a span of time, and often you know, we'll use averages in our analysis. And so I'm very cognizant of how Washington proceeded compared to other fisheries, or just wanting to make that characterization really apparent, and to be able to demonstrate, you know, fully where and what the need is for canary rockfish, and then how it's helping ease, you know, pressure on some of the nearshore stocks. So I think the GMT will have a report that will speak to all of the, you know, state's fishery needs, and hopefully that will help provide the council, you know, the full picture, and, you know, support some of those discussions on allocation. So,
yeah, and if I could just add, Lorna, I think you're doing a really good job of capturing, you know, the approach in Washington, and Phil, to your point about the 17, what we see here under the preliminary harvest guidelines at 17 metric tons, and just acknowledging there's a lot of conversation yet to be had about what that number is. The council in November, like you said, really gave the GMT a request to explore other ways of, or different ways of, how we come up with the 17 metric ton or the appropriate amount for the different sectors. And so I know that's also the work of the GMT to look at that. So when Lorna and I were chatting just yesterday, you know, and Lorna saying, well, it's kind of hard for me to do the analysis with just 17 right here, knowing that number could change. So acknowledging just that there's a lot of conversation to be had up until the April council meeting. And that's when the council will say, after some of this initial GMT look, oh, well, we'd like to look a little further at this allocation approach that's maybe different than what came up with the 17 metric tons. So this is really just the starting point. There's a lot of history with Canary, and I think a lot of interest by the council to be very careful about how we go about setting the harvest guidelines for the different sectors. So I just completely agree with what you're saying relative to where we are in that management process that I think Lorna went through before I got on.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. And I will add that we are doing and we say we, GMT, looking and scrutinizing across all of the fisheries, what the utilization has been and where, where there could be movement of harvest guideline from one sector to another. So that's all part of the analysis that's underway right now to be able to present some of those options to the council. So. Okay. Any other questions or comments folks have? Steve?
Thank you for that discussion. I'm one in the stands with my fingers crossed that that 17 number gets bumped up slightly. So thanks for having that discussion. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. I think it's important to know we're working with 17 for now, but that's not necessarily the end point. So, and you'll notice in some of my slides coming up, I've plastered them with preliminary.
Okay.
So it's early in the process here at this point. Okay. Let's see. Skip that one because we'd already covered that. Okay. So, all right. And here, so again, this is where we're diving mainly into Canary. So this figure here that you see is presenting Canary mortality for 2018 through 2023. So each box is a year. And then across the bottom of the box, you have the month. And then each of the ports is a different shade of blue. So Westport is the dark blue, and then CQ is the next darkest. And it's really only relevant for 2021 when our sampling of Area 3 moved to CQ because of port closures. So then from there you can see as the colors get lighter, it's Nia Bay, La Push, and Owako. So overall, you can see majority of Canary consistently are caught in Area 2, or as it's noted here, Westport. May and June were peak months through 2020, and then starting in 2021, you can start seeing where September is also a key month where we see larger landings. And I think some of that also has to do with some extended halibut opportunity. So, and again, here, we don't show 2017, but in 2018, as I was mentioning below, we had just a 2 Canary rockfish bag limit. And again, the fishery just wasn't terribly responsive yet to being able to retain Canary for what host of reasons, access to where they're found or just behaviorally, combination of factors there, I imagine. In 2019, no sub-bag limit, but again, relative to the harvest guideline, total mortality was pretty low. 2020, we just skip. It's here because of the way the coding for this data pool worked. But so in 2021, this is where you see we opened the Westport and South Coast YRCAs and see a dramatic increase in Canary catch, particularly in June and then September of that year. Similar, although reduced catches in 2022 overall, but a strong June and strong September. And then again in 2023, another step down in total catch, again dominated by Westport, but with a larger drop in September relative to the prior years. So I don't know if there's any questions on this in particular. Heather, if you want to flag anything, just kind of showing the over the last 5 years landings by the ports.
Yeah, I think, and for those that can see these graphs, to me, what really stood out, you mentioned it, Lorna, but in 2021, when we opened the two YRCAs in Westport, what I see in the graph there is that that increased catch a little bit in May with halibut, but also the June and September. And then thinking about that in terms of that deepwater Lingcod closure area that we have, where it's open June 1 to June 15th and September 1 to September 15th. And so to me, it looks like that provided a lot of opportunity to get at some of the Canary where, obviously in 2018 through 2020, we're really cautious about how we started catching Canary. You mentioned that, Lorna, very careful about it. We didn't even allow Canary retention on the North Coast right off the bat because of concerns that people would misidentify them as yellow eye, and we're still in the yellow eye situation. So those were some of the takeaways I saw, that June and September bump up in catch in 2022 as well. And then a little more moderate in 2023 for those months.
Bill?
Yeah, I would just add, anybody that's spent any time around me talking about this issue will say, I've heard that before. I don't think we can overemphasize the impact that opening those two areas, well, the one area in particular at Gray's Canyon, had on Canary catches, and the amount of effort that as the word spread rapidly, the number of boats fishing that area was, I never would have guessed it. I counted as many as 100 boats there. And I think, so I wish we could have had some pictures of what it looked like before we opened the fishery after that area being closed all those years, because I think it would have been pretty stunning. Mm-hmm. And as time has progressed, of course, more and more people learned about the spot and blah, blah, blah. And it's a relatively large area besides. But I think, and some of the people on the phone here can speak to it much better than I, because they're fishing it all the time. But I think what's happened over time is it has gotten, I'm not going to say it's been fished out, but it is, the numbers of fish there are much less abundant now than they were when we opened it initially. And so, and I think that's why you're seeing a decline from that big burst in 21 to this year. Mm-hmm. So I'll step aside. I see Rhett's got his hand up, and I know he and Steve and others, again, are much better than I, because they've been at that, out and fished that a lot, and they have seen what has transpired over the last 3 years.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Rhett?
And not that it's gonna really bring anything to the table, but the last couple of years, that area has been really a little harder to get your halibut in. And so guys tended to concentrate more on trying to get their halibut done or lingcod and not having the time to go chase canaries around. And that may be part of the effect as well. I don't, I know they tend to move around a lot out there, so I don't necessarily think it got fished out, but they move in and move out, and that may play a big part of it as well.
All right. Thanks, Rhett. Steve?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with both what Phil and Rhett said, and your chart does bear it out that the trend is going down, and I've kind of represented that a little bit, that the fishing success out in that one RCA area, you know, it was phenomenal. And then because of probably so much pressure, it got more difficulty last year on the deep water trips. Wasn't as easy to get your fish, even in June or September, whatever. But your charts bear it out a little bit. I think that the trend is down, and it's not as robust fishery as it was. I call it kind of the buzz factor. You know, when it gets a little tougher, it's you're not going to have as much effort. You know, maybe some of the effort that's going from Westport that maybe came from the North Coast areas, maybe some of those fishers might migrate back to those areas. But it was really good for a while out there. But in my mind, it seems that the trend is going down, or at least going to be stable. I don't think the canary catch is going to spike like it did in those earlier years in 2021, especially. So,
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Steve.
you're
I
welcome.
know looking at some of our fishery survey data, so independent of sport fishing, it's a hook and line survey. We do see an effect, I guess, of some of the reduced fishing in 2020 and 2021, depending on the area on the coast. There are some higher catch rates that we can attribute to just reduced fishing opportunities and effort in those pandemic years. So let's see this next slide. Get there. So here again, canary mortality for this, in this case, just 2022 and 2023. So each year is a vertical set of boxes and then the rows. If you look on the right-hand side, you can see bottomfish is the top set of boxes, halibut is the middle set of boxes, and salmon is the bottom. And again, dark blue is area 2 or Westport, with the other ports lighter shades. Again, you see here in the last 2 years, June and September being kind of the peak of landings or mortality. Does look like halibut pushes up catch in May. And then otherwise across all 3 fisheries, September canary mortality dropped more relative to June between the 2 years. I don't know if that was a effort or exactly, but it's noticeable that there's more of a drop there, and or halibut is just continuing to support the catch in the spring months. Talking about this drop that we see in canary in 2023 compared to 2022, I did dive into the data a little bit and to kind of better understand, was that because effort was down or what? And I think it actually speaks to what you were just saying, Steve, that it was a little harder to catch. because the number of anglers between the 2 years was actually very similar. And I looked at the catch per unit of effort. So catch, or I'm sorry, I have to watch my terminology here. It's mortality per angler for anyone that had retained canary and also were within legal bag limits. The CPUE for 2022 was 0.5, and in 2023 it was 0.3. So a 40% decline in CPUE between the 2 years. So I think, again, that the data kind of bear out sort of what your on the water experience that you're relating. It could be, a combination of fishing down some of the biomass that was there, some of them moving on just with oceanographic changes, they're mobile fish. So it's probably all part of that, but the data kind of bear out what you're describing as having it be more challenging. So any questions on this figure? Okay. So I will to next. So in looking where we're at now, analyzing the data, trying to develop, knowing that we are, currently working with that preliminary value of 17 metric tons, but that could change. I still am looking at options that can get us under that or to that 17 metric ton level. And so there's right now with status quo, we see the high catch in the last couple of years, but all three are higher than what this preliminary 25-26 harvest limit is. So options include re-implementing a sub-limit, using monthly closures, maybe something similar to what's done with vermilion, copper, and quillback. Also could consider closing some of the deep water areas again, or we consider the YRCA closures again. So just kind of a range of options. And as I'm we'll be sharing some ideas that I've been working on. Just wanted to let you know that looking at everything from no retention to almost full bag limits to like no months to all months, and the reason why the measures are going to be that broad isn't to alarm anyone or to say that those are actually real viable alternatives. That, I mean, they could be, and I want them to be viable, but they maybe are very low-level candidates. The idea there is that the analysis that we do now and that gets into the public process and documented, then any of these tools, in a sense, if you think of these different options as a tool in the toolbox, are available to the council or managers, say in 2026, if something unforeseen happens and we would choose or want to consider a different approach to reducing canary catch, all of these tools are in the toolbox. If they haven't been analyzed in this period between now and June and presented, then they're not available to the council to consider. So just kind of give you the heads up that not necessarily all of these options are equal candidates in the process. So on this next slide, done some preliminary analysis looking at what it would mean to reduce the bag limit for canary. And so this is averaging projected mortality, or we're using the average of 2022 and 2023 as sort of our projection for the future. And if that were the case, if we had with a status quo of 31 metric tons, if we were to implement a 6 canary sub-bag limit, we would reduce our mortality to 16 metric tons. And then stepping down from there, a 5 canary bag limit would result in a 9 metric ton, and I'm rounding here. Total mortality, a 4 bag limit would get us to 6. 3 bag limit would get us to just almost 5. And then down to a 2 and a 1, we're down at 3 and 2 metric tons. So what this tells us is that simply by going from a 7 rockfish canary bag limit, if someone were to target their full 7 on canary, we can drop that to 1 and see fairly substantial savings. I spent some time looking at this because at first, and when I was sharing the data with Heather in one of our check-ins, and she's like, "Well, this doesn't make sense, Lorna. Like, how can you go from, like 7 rock canary bag limit to 6 and drop us down that much?" But really, what I can see in 2022 and 2023 is that the majority of canary were caught by relatively few anglers, and so it definitely reflects the targeting of anglers taking 6 and 7 canary as their rockfish limit. And so the canary weren't spread across all anglers keeping 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. It's really concentrated by anglers that appear to be targeting canary and filling their rockfish limit with canary. So dropping it down 1 or 2 fish does have the substantial savings, just because anglers that were retaining 5 or fewer canary were just a minority of the effort focused on canary rockfish. So, for example, in 2022, 25% of the anglers were responsible for 70% of the mortality. And then in 2023, 23% of the anglers were responsible for 60% of the mortality. And these are at bag limits of 6 and 7 fish. So again, a substantial amount of the canary being caught by relatively few anglers, and those that are catching them are catching those, filling their bags.
Could you repeat that?
Sure. No problem. I know it's a lot of numbers. So I'll start with 2022, 25% of the anglers were responsible for 70% of the mortality. And these are anglers with bag limits of 6 and 7. And then in 2023 was 23% of the anglers responsible for 60% of the mortality. And that again is at bag limits of 6 and 7 canary. And the only difference between, I could pick up bag limits of 5 fish, and the 2023 number would be more similar to 2022, but it's just, I think, reflecting that reduced availability of canary. There were more anglers with 5 fish bag limits than in 2022. And in both years, about the same, about 60% of all anglers weren't retaining canary at all. So it's really a target fishery that's occurring here rather than a broad-based retention of canary. So, and I can also, if anyone wants numbers or tables, I can provide those separately offline as well. So then looking at the next table, other options, and again, this is kind of a, I don't know, menu. Some I just came up with, a couple were requested. So just walking you through the table. The top row there, you see projected mortality by month, and that's kind of the status quo using a baseline average of 2022 and 23. What we'd expect to see in terms of mortality on a monthly basis going from March through October. So for that baseline, March would be 0.28 metric tons. April would be 1.37 metric tons. May would be 6.01 metric tons. June is 10.4 metric ton, 10.04 metric tons, sorry. July is 2.58 metric tons. August is 4.49 metric tons. September is 6.31 metric tons, and then October is 0.17 metric tons. And again, that totals 31.2, which is the average that was landed in 22 and 23. So then looking at some closure or bag limit options, just erase these out by months. And so if there were no retention in May 1st through July 31st, and this just was like, okay, what's a simple way to present this to the public that aligns that with the copper, quillback, and vermilion non-retention time period? So you'd zero out May, June, and July. And that brings down the total mortality to 12.6 metric tons. I will note that I've zeroed them out here. We would want to still account for some level of retained fish. This is assuming perfect compliance. So we'd want to build some buffers in depending on the option.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah.
But on that point too, I was wondering, does that account for, in those places where it's just zero, does that account for discard mortality? So if there's no retention, there's going to be some discard and some mortality with that.
Yeah, this is all based on retained and released estimates. So it should account for the released mortality.
Okay.
Yeah. It just doesn't account for illegal retention.
Okay.
So this is like in the perfect world. Everybody knows exactly what they're catching and all of that. So then the next one is looking just like at an in-season closure after June. Like, let's just open the fishery and run track landings, and by E-reg close the fishery. And in saying that, I mean close, canary to retention fully for the rest of the season. That one's a little bit tricky because there's a lag in when we catch estimates through our port sampling program. So we could overshoot that unintentionally just with the not knowing for sure in time. But that is one possibility. The other idea was no retention, just August 1 through October. And that just aligns with late season halibut and salmon if open. Could consider a June only closure, closing the peak month. And again, these are all just sort of ideas. This isn't a comprehensive list, and can consider other ideas as well. And then there were two requests. So I looked at a 2 canary sub-bag limit in May, and you can see that there's some savings there relative to the status quo, which would be 6 metric tons. It drops the mortality to 0.7. But if we were working to a 17 metric ton harvest guideline, we wouldn't get there because that comes out at 25 or nearly 26 metric tons, just going to 2 canary sub-bag limit in May. And then the last one there on the list is a 2 canary sub-bag limit in May, but on halibut days only. So you could still have bottom fish trips retaining canary, and that reduces mortality from 6 metric tons to 2.3 metric tons. And again, that doesn't get us to where we need to be if we were looking at a 17 metric ton harvest guideline. So just kind of give some folks ideas of what kinds of ways we can think about this. I'm not sure if it's how doable it is to look at area closures. I think that's a little bit more subjective in our ability to evaluate. Just we don't have numbers related to those catch areas specifically. Okay, Phil?
Yeah, thanks, Lorna. I don't know if I'm shocked, but I'm close to being shocked by your analysis of the changes in the estimated total mortalities associated with your bag limit changes. But can you remind us of the flow of and timing of data, in-season data? I would be particular. I think stability. There's a lot to be said for stability in a given season, minimizing in-season changes, particularly if they're bad. So, at least from my, I guess, set of values, I would want to take an approach that had a fairly low chance of us being you, to impose in-season management measures that were more restrictive than what we started the season with. So, in thinking about that, just wondered if you would remind us kind of the intervals when we get our data for ground fish, for bottom fish, so we can remind ourselves that it's certainly not like salmon or halibut in terms of the flow of data, and just remind ourselves of what the timing is.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. So yeah, salmon and halibut are done weekly. Ground fish is done on a monthly basis. And Heather, I'm going to phone a friend here. Glad you're on the call now. So if we were looking to say a closure at the end of June, I think the earliest we would know catch through June would be the end of July.
Yeah, it's true. And so we get our monthly estimates on a 1 month lag. So a May estimate would come in July, which is why we don't usually have it for the June council meeting. It's made that really hard. And then when we have those estimates, which we're always looking at, May, when halibut is where we would see canary and yellow eye numbers in June, then having those not until September is where we have very little room, at least through the council process, to make effective change. We can certainly take in-season action through Department of Fish and Wildlife. If we see something in July from earlier in the year, to avoid going over anything, but we don't have the ability to have that conversation through the council and the GAP and all of that. It would be just through our state stakeholder process.
So yeah, harder for us to get current landing information in season. Is that a new hand, Phil, or your old hand?
It's ancient.
Okay, Steve, go ahead.
Okay, can you go back to the slide 16, I guess?
Yeah.
My pea brain here. So this says by changing, going from a basically a 7 rockfish to a 6, just across the board, a 6 canary sub bag limit. That for the season, that says there that the total mortality would be 16, like cut in half. That's what that means. Or am I reading it backwards?
No, you're reading it correctly.
Okay. So
Yeah.
by having you kind of got to wrap your brain around it, because you go to the bottom and having it 1, it is 2. It seems backwards, but I like it. I mean, I don't dislike it.
Yeah, it's a bit shocking. And I think, again, it reflects how much of the canary were taken by people getting 6 and 7 fish in their bags.
I get that now a little bit about the catch is not by everybody. It's by, you gave the percentages about fewer fishermen are doing the most damage, however you want to say it.
Having the most fun.
Having the most fun, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, and I think, depending on where we end up with the, harvest guideline, again, these sub-bag limits, they're based on averages, and we'd want to consider, how we would buffer. And I haven't done anything like that yet with these preliminary estimates. This is just running the numbers and saying, here's what it looks like. So, Larry?
Yeah, thanks, Lorna. So just want to echo what Phil said. We're all living through the California example right now of in-season management that is challenging. So we appreciate the creativity and trying to draft a plan that keeps us out of in-season management. One of the things so I fish a little bit for canaries, and obviously when we fish for canaries, we're fishing for canaries and yellowtail. And if we have a bag limit of 6, sub-bag limit of 6, I'm just wondering, I, like others, I'm looking at this math and saying, wow, that's pretty profound savings. But there also might be, if we're having that much success trying to catching canaries, there might be some discard mortalities that we're not looking at here relative, or we don't, jumps out at us. It's not as clean as that when we're trying to catch that 7th fish, being a yellowtail in this instance. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. And I think because this analysis looks at retained and released relative to the rockfish that were retained, so it's building in that release estimate or discard mortality. But again, as you noted earlier, that is reported, from and collected from dockside interviews. So it's an approximation, it's an estimate. So again, I think depending on where we land, considering, again, anglers' ability to ID the different fish, if you're targeting yellow eye and canary are there at the same time. So some consideration just for some of the dynamics that we can't necessarily crunch as numbers, but to make sure that we're, being precautionary.
That's an interesting point, Larry, and it's making me think about when we did when we dropped the rockfish sub limit. Or the bottomfish limit down to 9. And then I think we did some work to say, what are people going to do to fill the gap? And what kind of discard is that? But agree with Lorna that that's a place where we'll want to think about that. And whether or not that's a good place for a buffer, to just acknowledge people are still going to attempt to fill their 7 rockfish. and they'll likely discard some canary while they're trying to get that 7th yellowtail.
Ron?
Well, I think you kind of hit on what I was going to say. Would we be able to keep a 7 rockfish total limit and take the canaries down to 6? But it sounds like that you are saying yes on that. So that was kind of my question.
Okay. Yes, that's correct. And it is, yeah, it's, even as much as I've looked at the data, it's still like Heather and I, it just seems remarkable.
It does. And I was, the little extra digging, Lorna, that you did to look at that, the effect of the kind of the targeting factor and the fact that certain bag limits were filled with canary was really helped me get over that. Like Bill and Steve, the look at that 6 canary sub bag going, that can't be right. That can't be right. But so anyway, and again, Lorna's done a terrific job of digging in and giving us a first glance at what some of these ideas look like. We still have time to work on it some more. So this is the real value of having you all here, and providing your actual boots on the ground experience to help us make sure we're not missing something or seeing something that doesn't seem realistic to you.
Jason, did you have a question? I saw your hand go up momentarily.
Oh yeah, I did. I know we didn't used to have the sequelizers back when we were releasing these, and I'm wondering if that maybe a lot of the savings we get from going to 7 to 6 is attributed to some of that. 6 seems pretty good to me. That achieves all the goals.
Yeah, in this analysis, no, that doesn't factor in. That's a separate. In fact, I guess this would be, I mean, where descending device credits have been applied, because I have to think, because I'm working from multiple data sources and at different points pulling the data from the data stream. But those credits get applied to total mortality. So to the extent that they're built into the estimate, they're accounted for here, but I didn't specifically can't pull that out and say, oh, you saved this percentage of fish, or because they were released in, with a descending device. So that's not a clear answer, in part because it's a little difficult to, in my head right now, tease out where that would factor in, just based on the data sets I'm using.
Thank you.
So it's still a good thing to do, even if Lorna can't see it in the numbers. Okay. Brett?
Yeah, if we were to go to a 6 canary sub bag, I can tell you the people, the 25, 23%, whatever, of the people having the most fun, have the entire world open to them if they leave the canary grounds to go inshore and cleanly target yellowtails. I mean, and even if they couldn't find them, it isn't the end of the world. 6 canaries is still a pretty decent catch. People want to see the color much more than they really need to see each and every fish of their bag limit. They're still going to be happy.
I have a, thanks, Brett. Question, because I know, and this kind of predates me as far as interest in moving effort off of black rockfish. in reducing the canary sub bag limit, do you see the shift then to yellowtail, or how will that, do you guys think, impact black rockfish?
Well, I would say, you know, your shift, if somebody's out there getting 6 canaries and then they're coming back in to get something else, it's not going to be black rockfish. It's too far. The triangle is too big. Your if you start reducing canary sub bags down into 3, then you're going to see a significant uptick in black rockfish, and or because it's no longer worth going all the way out to get your canaries for 3 or something like that. If you do want to see a shift, I think a significant shift off of nearshore would be to get rid of the May restriction. There's a lot of boats that would stay out and catch yellowtails in May, and target lingcod inside of 50 fathoms, and I don't think it would show a significant amount of canary rockfish take, but it certainly would reduce the amount of time spent on blacks, quillbacks, toppers, so on and so forth.
All right. Thank you. Let's see, I'll go. So really at this point, I'm just checking. We have no additional slides. This is the end of it. So we can entertain any other questions or any thoughts folks have. I see your hand's still up. Brett, did you have a second question or comment? Oh, no, it went down. Okay, Steve?
I'll agree with what Brett said about the 30 fathom closure. I don't personally feel it's as valuable as when it was first implemented years ago. And exactly what he said, people would spend more time likely targeting yellowtails rather than black rockfish. So thanks for that. And thanks for the good meeting also, by the way.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve. I'm just pausing here to take notes. Let's see, Ron?
Yeah, I really want to say thank you to all of you for the way you bring these meetings together and include everybody. A lot of the other divisions aren't like this, and you take input, you look at it, and you look for the best scenario. And I just really want to say thank you to you and Heather and the rest of the staff for the way you put these meetings together and make it easy for people to understand, because we're going to have to go back and sell this. And I think that 6 rockfish limit, the canary, looks like the simplest of all of it. But I just want to tell you that we do really appreciate the way you do things and all your hard work to try and make things the best for everybody. So thank you.
Right. Thanks, Ron. And I'll just add a bit of caution. The 6 fish bag limit looks very attractive, but it is like all preliminary. So just want to flag that. We still have quite a ways to go, but it is more hopeful than maybe I think folks that were picking up on the issue with canary. I guess it's a little bit more hope than we might have otherwise thought before we could dig into the data. So we're just not done yet. But yes, thank you, Ron, for the kind words. I appreciate that. And that you said you can understand it is really good, because sometimes that's the hardest part, is knowing how to put all this together in a package that folks can begin to digest. So, Phil?
Yeah, thanks. Well, first I'll pile on with the praise for the great meeting and all the work that led up to bringing this to us. Lots and lots of information that's very valuable and helps us provide, hopefully, some advice back that's meaningful. I wondered if you could take a moment here and just think ahead here. We're sitting here in January, whatever it is, 15th or something like that. I think if my memory serves me right, the next really significant discussion on these topics is in April, I believe, at the April council meeting. And as you mentioned, some of the information is preliminary, and we need to do, some more work, make sure what the data is telling us is something we should, and how we use it is correct and all that good stuff. So in terms of from today, looking ahead to April, are you thinking about having another one of these meetings at some point in time between now and then? Circle back. You've presented a lot of information. I know there's probably a lot of us, well, certainly me, that would like to have a chance to look at it a little bit more. And as I said in my remarks earlier, some of the bag limit analysis is pretty shocking. Would like to have an opportunity to think about that, and also take some time to evaluate what the risks are of picking an alternative, maybe that doesn't align with what you might think in terms of risk and staying away from having to make in-season management changes that result in more restrictive regulations. So anyway, bottom line is thanks very much for this, and what can we look forward to between now and, if April is the right time frame that I'm thinking of in terms of the next major step for the council.
Do you want to take that one, Heather?
Sure.
I think you have a better sense of the process.
Yeah, sure. And yeah, absolutely. The idea would be to get back together prior to April. So what we've typically done is brought forward a range of alternatives for the April council meeting. And so that's what we want to hone in on, the glimpse of what you saw here and what Lorna's really dug into so far, and make sure that range includes tools we'd like to be able to have analyzed for the future. And so and also we probably need to talk about what that date looks like, because it would be trying to fit it in around the March council meeting or between the March council meeting. And I know there's a lot of North of Falcon meetings going on. So finding the right timing there to get together with everyone. I think maybe what we did last time was really right after the March council meeting, when I think the council scheduled to get an update on specs. There's no decision, but we'll get a little update, follow up, and after the March council meeting, and then that should give us time to get something drafted in terms of a WDFW report that includes a range of alternatives for April. And then that sets us up for April, and then we'll get back together with you all in May in preparation for making a final recommendation for the June council meeting. So I guess Phil and Butch and all of you that are involved with North of Falcon, if you think trying to find some time right after the March council meeting makes sense for a follow-up, we would look for a date and time that works for everyone. Also noting fishing starts up the third week in March. Excuse me.
Sorry. Just in response, I would obviously recommend you get together with Kyle, take a look at the North of Falcon schedule, so we don't schedule something that's right on top of a North Falcon meeting. The other thing I just to keep in mind, I would guess we are not trying to get something in by the deadline of the advanced briefing book, because I think that is actually like February 1st or something. It's just crazy. No, I'm sorry, that'd be for March. But so well, I'll bet it's
Same.
the last week of February or something for the April council meeting.
Yeah.
So if we don't have that as a bookend for us, which I don't think we should, I think your time maybe is about right. Something, shortly after the March council meeting, something that doesn't land right on top of a North Falcon meeting, seems to me would be, make sense. The only other thing I would put out there is, my guess is the council's gonna be looking for a preliminary preferred alternative in April. And while we don't have to do that, I'm guessing that that's what we'll be looking at. So when we're thinking about what we're going to provide in April, that includes, some number of alternatives, whether it's 2 or 3 or 4. We should also be thinking when we have our next meeting, do we want to identify one of these as a preliminary preferred alternative? Because my recollection of all the spec cycles I've been involved in is that's usually what we walk out of the April meeting with, is preliminary preferred. And obviously, those could be changed when you get to June, but they do give a more solid direction about where we're headed in June.
Yeah, super good point. If we can get to that, I think that's ideal. I agree.
Hey, Lorna, I don't want to jump ahead anyway, but I can't get my hand to work. So whenever it's appropriate, I got my hand up.
Okay, well, there are no other hands, so you've got the floor, Butch.
Thank you. I just like to say once again, like others said, that Phil and I and others get to work with or see all the West Coast fisheries departments, and once again, like salmon, you ladies and all your staff are just phenomenal on getting the information to people compared to the other states, and working with the constituents to let them be involved in the process. And this is just early on, one case in point to prepare people, even though we're a year away, but prepare people what might or will happen in the future. So thank you for that. Really, it's just, you don't get enough credit for that, certainly in social media and all that. But I, for one, I really appreciate that. And the other question I have is, and I don't know this question, so I'm asking it. Have you seen or got a sense of what pain that Oregon might have to go through on this process? I just like Yellow Eye, I don't want to get lumped into the let's all to share the pain equally program. And we'll have to have at least a few votes to get whatever plan we set forward. And we want to make sure that especially our friends to the south are on board with what we're trying to propose. And like I said, I don't know what they're trying to propose. I don't know if you've called Lynn and talked to her, but I know that's kind of that'll be a big deal going forward here. So anyway, once again, thank you, ladies. Phenomenal job.
Thanks, Butch. And that's a really good point. I know Lorna and the GMT are meeting the week after the IPHC meeting, and we'll start going through all this, but it'll probably be a great time, and we can catch up with Lynn at the halibut meeting next week too, to just start with that coordination. I know from the black rockfish stock assessment, that's, they're kind of where we were after the 2015 black rockfish assessment for Washington, and having to make some hard decisions about black rockfish, but really appreciate you thinking about that too, and happy to make those connections with Lynn and ODFW.
Yeah, That's good. I value that reminder, Butch. I think I was tripping myself up earlier, and Heather reminded me, oh, don't forget we have Oregon when you're thinking about the Columbia River and the way the rules are structured there, because there was one in particular that I just couldn't figure out why it was written the way it was. So thanks for that. And yeah, so we have IPH next week, and then the following week, so it's end of January going through the first couple of days of February, the groundfish management team is meeting in Portland, and we'll be walking through each other's analysis and our write-ups, because we're preparing the analytical document that the council will use as far as their deliberation, or provides the information for their deliberations on the harvest specs. So we'll be able to get into like the details of what Oregon's thinking and the analysis they've done, and they'll likewise be able to look at, you know, what we're looking at and how I've crunched the numbers and presenting them. So at the technical level, we'll get into the weeds at that meeting. Any other questions? We're almost at time. I just don't want to cut anyone off if you're any. Someone's getting paged. All right. Well,
I was gonna say something, but this dang phone started ringing. I just was ditto what Ron Garner and Butch said and Phil about you guys doing a lot of work, and it doesn't go unnoticed. So thank you very much, you guys, gals.
All right. Well, thanks, Steve. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, it's helpful.
We appreciate you guys back very much, and always feel like you're gonna keep us on the right track, and we get really valuable input from you. And thank you for making the time for these meetings, and look forward to keeping the conversation going as we work through this biennial process.
Okay, well, with that, I think we can conclude, and yeah, I'll echo Heather, just really appreciate all of you coming this morning and providing your thoughts and your expertise. It just is immensely beneficial, I think, for all of us to be able to have, you know, some good conversations, and better able then to address what conservation challenges we face, and have whatever actions we take make the most sense. And I think, as I still told Steve, the conversation, like, what's going to be the least painful that gets us where we need to be relative to conservation. So anyways, thanks everyone. And yeah, we'll follow up with a meeting announcement. I'll probably do like I've done before, where I'll just send out a save the date, and then some additional information closer to, just, I know how things can get buried in my schedule. So I think having like a 2-step like notice for these meetings has worked. And yeah, if you want to let anyone else know, they can go jump online in a couple of days. This will be up on our website under the halibut bottomfish web pages, for others to jump in and see. At least they can get access to the slides if they don't want to actually sit through the whole recording. And I'm happy to share slides as you might wish. So just let me know. But anyway, I think, have a good day, and we'll see you all, I guess, in their next, some of us will see each other at March. Otherwise, we'll see you at the next meeting. So,
bye.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.